They say you're too much, too emotional, too intense, too deep, too passionate, and suddenly they're pulling away. It hurts, doesn't it? Because you weren't trying to scare them off, you were showing up honestly. You weren't pretending, you weren't playing games, you were just you, and somehow you became too much. The moment someone starts to pull away, it can create a storm inside you. You start replaying every conversation, every text, wondering, did I push too hard? Did I share too much? Should I have held back? And here's the dangerous part: when you internalize their withdrawal, you start thinking that maybe you are too much, that maybe love, attention, and emotional openness should come in smaller doses. That maybe the way to keep someone is to water yourself down. But let me tell you something: that's the fastest way to lose yourself. And losing yourself to keep someone else is the worst trade you'll ever make. So, when someone pulls away, you don't chase, you don't shrink. You do this. When someone pulls away from you, the first wave that hits is confusion. You're sitting there replaying moments, reading between the lines, trying to remember if you said something wrong or showed too much too soon. You start scanning through every text, every call, every detail, as if somewhere in the rewind there's a clue you missed. The silence on their end becomes louder than anything they've ever said to you, and in that silence, your mind starts inventing 1,000 possible reasons for why they're distancing themselves. That's when the urge to act becomes overwhelming. To text them one more time, to call and just check in, to somehow fix the discomfort you're feeling by pulling them back toward you. But here's the truth no one wants to hear in that moment. Chasing after someone who's pulling away never creates closeness. It only magnifies the distance. It's not because you're not worthy, and it's not because you don't mean something to them. It's because connection has to be mutual to survive. And when someone's instinct is to step back, there's something happening inside them, whether it's fear, uncertainty, or just a realization that they're not ready, that you cannot fix by pushing forward. The moment you try to close the gap they've created, you communicate a subtle but dangerous message that their presence is more valuable than your own stability. You may not say it out loud, but your actions tell the story. Every time you rush towards someone who's retreating, you tell them, I will abandon my own center to keep you close. And the hard reality is, the more you abandon yourself to hold on to them, the more they lose respect for you, whether they realize it consciously or not. There is a kind of strength in not moving when someone creates space. It's not passive and it's not indifferent. It's an act of self-respect. It's saying, I'm here, I'm whole, and I'm not going to collapse just because you've stepped back. That stillness is magnetic. People feel it, even if they can't explain it. It's the energy of someone who knows their value isn't determined by another person's ability to stay close at all times. It's the quiet confidence of a person who's willing to let life show them the truth instead of trying to force a particular outcome. The irony is, when you give someone space without panic, they are far more likely to drift back toward you, because they sense you're not clinging, you're not desperate, and you're not willing to contort yourself just to keep them. But holding your ground isn't easy, especially if you've been conditioned to believe that love must be earned through constant proving. Maybe you've grown up believing that if someone drifts, it's because you didn't do enough. Maybe you've learned that affection is something you have to chase and hold on to with everything you have, because if you don't, it'll disappear. That conditioning can make stillness feel unbearable. It can make you believe that doing nothing is the same as losing, but the reality is, doing nothing in those moments is often the most powerful choice you can make. It's not about ignoring them or playing games. It's about giving them the space they're asking for without sacrificing your own peace. Think about the relationships in your life where you feel most secure. Chances are those are the ones where you're not afraid to take a breath, to have your own moments, to not constantly be on, to keep the connection alive. That's what healthy relationships thrive on: space that doesn't threaten the bond. When someone pulls away, you're getting a chance to see whether that same foundation exists here, and if it doesn't, that's important information. You can't build something strong on a foundation that collapses the moment someone takes a step back. Now, holding your ground doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you act cold or distant just to protect yourself. In fact, it's the opposite. It means you care enough about yourself to not let fear run your decisions. You're willing to honor their space without abandoning your dignity. You're not pretending you don't notice the shift. You're simply choosing not to respond with panic. Panic leads to over-explaining, over-texting, over-offering. And when you do that, you're not actually building intimacy. You're trying to control the outcome. The truth is, you can't control whether someone stays or goes. But you can control whether you stay true to yourself while you find out. Picture this, you're standing on the shore and the tide goes out. Your instinct might be to run after the water, to grab at it before it's gone. But the ocean always comes back, not because you chased it, but because that's what it does. People are the same. If they are meant to be close to you, they will come back of their own accord. If they don't, then chasing them only delays the inevitable. The most loving thing you can do for yourself in that moment is to stay rooted and let the tide show you what it's going to do. This takes practice, because every fiber of your being might be screaming at you to close the gap. It might feel like if you don't act now, you'll lose them forever, and yes, you might. But if your connection is so fragile that a short pause causes it to disintegrate, then what exactly are you trying to save? A relationship that needs constant chasing to survive is not a relationship. It's a performance, and the moment you step off the stage, the show ends. That's not love. That's dependency disguised as passion. When you hold your ground, something shifts inside you. You stop needing to be chosen in every second to believe you're worth choosing. You start to see that someone pulling away isn't automatically a verdict on your value. It's a reflection of where they are, what they're capable of, or what they truly want. And that's information you need, because the worst thing you can do is waste months or years convincing someone to want what you want when they've already shown you they don't. It's also important to recognize that when you chase, you take on the role of the pursuer. That dynamic sets the tone for the rest of the connection. The more you pursue, the more they retreat because they feel the imbalance. But when you stay where you are, open, warm, but unshaken, you give them the choice to step forward without feeling pressured. That's how you keep your power in the dynamic. You're not holding them hostage to your needs, and you're not holding yourself hostage to theirs. You're letting both of you operate from freedom, and freedom is where real connection grows. Sometimes holding your ground will mean they return and things become stronger than before. Other times it will mean they disappear and you're left with the sting of loss. But here's the thing, loss isn't the enemy. Losing yourself to avoid loss is. If someone's absence leaves you feeling hollow, that's a sign to build a life so full that no one person's withdrawal can take all the light from it. That way, whether they stay or go, you remain whole. The art of staying grounded when someone pulls away is also about trusting timing. Maybe they're dealing with something personal. Maybe they're overwhelmed by the depth of the connection and need a moment to breathe. That's fine, as long as it's a moment, not a pattern. Your role is not to force their timeline, but to watch what they do with the time they take. If they come back with clarity and effort, you'll know it was worth holding steady. If they don't, you'll know you didn't waste your energy running after someone who had no intention of matching your pace. Every time you resist the urge to chase, you're teaching yourself a new habit, one where your self-worth isn't on trial every time someone takes a step back. You're proving to yourself that you can survive discomfort without scrambling for reassurance. You're learning to trust that the right people won't need you to collapse in order to keep them. And in that trust, you become the kind of person who's irresistible, not because you're playing games, but because you're living in truth. So the next time someone pulls away, take a deep breath. Let them go as far as they feel they need to. Stand where you are, rooted in who you are. Keep living. Keep loving yourself, keep your energy warm, but your boundaries strong, because the moment you show the world that you won't shrink just to keep someone, you start attracting the people who would never ask you to. There's a phrase that can sting in a way few others can: you're too much. Sometimes it's said directly, sometimes it's implied through tone, body language, or the quiet pulling away that follows your openness. It lands like a judgment not just on what you did, but on who you are, and when you hear it enough, whether from partners, friends, or even family, it can start to burrow its way into your identity. You begin to carry it like a weight, wondering if your depth, your intensity, your way of loving is actually a flaw you're supposed to fix. But what if that phrase doesn't mean what you think it does? What if it's not a verdict on your worth at all, but a reflection of someone else's capacity? The truth is, when people say you're too much, what they're often expressing, sometimes without even realizing it is, you make me feel more than I'm prepared to feel. Your depth isn't an overreaction, it's a mirror, and sometimes when people look into that mirror, they're not ready for what they see in themselves. You might stir emotions they've worked hard to bury. You might ignite a level of vulnerability they're not ready to step into. And instead of facing that, it's easier for them to push the narrative onto you, labeling you as too much, so they don't have to admit they're not ready to swim in waters that deep. Think about it. A person who's comfortable with emotional depth doesn't get scared by someone who expresses their feelings. They don't label passion as intensity or vulnerability as excess. They see it as connection. They value it because they know how rare it is to find someone who isn't afraid to be seen fully. So when someone pulls away and frames your openness as a flaw, you have to ask yourself, is this really about me, or is it about their limits? The answer, most of the time, is that it's about them. And that's not an indictment of their character. It's simply where they are on their own journey. The shift happens when you stop seeing too much as an insult and start seeing it as a filter. Because that's exactly what it is. Your depth naturally separates the people who are able to meet you there from the people who aren't. It's like the ocean. Some people love the calm shallows where their feet can touch the ground. Others crave the vast, unpredictable beauty of the deep water. If you're the ocean, you don't shrink to a puddle just to keep someone close. You stay what you are, and you let the right ones find you. But that's easier said than done when you've internalized the idea that you have to be palatable to everyone to be lovable. Maybe you've learned to tone yourself down in conversations, to hold back your excitement so you don't seem over the top, to ration your affection so you don't overwhelm someone. That's the tragedy of believing you're too much. It trains you to dim your own light in the hope that someone else will find it easier to stay. But here's the problem with that. The people who can only stay when you're dimmed are the same people who will leave anyway. You can't keep someone by being less of yourself without eventually resenting them and yourself for it. Imagine a flame. When you turn it low to keep someone from getting burned, you also stop giving off the warmth and light that make you who you are. The people meant for you aren't afraid of the flame. They draw closer to it. They value the way it lights up the dark. They appreciate that it can cook a meal, warm a home, spark inspiration. And yes, sometimes that same fire will be intense, but the right people will know how to stand in its glow without fearing it. The wrong people will always be searching for a dimmer switch. Your job isn't to install one, it's to protect the fire. Reframing too much into deep enough is about reclaiming ownership of your emotional range. It's about seeing that your capacity for love, empathy, and connection isn't a liability, it's an asset. Not everyone has that capacity. Not everyone wants to live life in high definition. Some people are more comfortable keeping things surface level because it feels safer. And that's fine for them, but you have to decide if that's fine for you, because every time you try to be less, to fit into someone else's comfort zone, you're making a trade, their temporary comfort for your long-term fulfillment. And it's never worth it. When someone pulls away and says, or implies, that you're too much, your first instinct might be to prove you can be different, that you can be more easygoing, more detached, more like what they want. You might tell yourself that if you just hold back a little, they'll stay. But even if that works in the short term, it won't in the long run, because the truth always comes out. Sooner or later, your natural way of loving, speaking, feeling, it will surface. And if they're not ready for it, the same cycle will repeat. This is why reframing is so powerful. When you reframe too much as deep enough, you stop trying to adapt to people who are never equipped to meet you. Instead, you start valuing your intensity as the very thing that will draw the right person in. This reframing also changes the way you carry yourself. When you believe you're too much, you enter relationships from a place of apology, constantly monitoring yourself, editing your words second, guessing your emotions. You move through love as if you're walking on eggshells, trying not to crack the fragile idea that you're acceptable. But when you believe you're deep enough, you show up without apology. You communicate your feelings without rehearsing them for hours first. You share your passions without wondering if they'll think it's weird. You love openly without waiting for permission. That doesn't mean you lack self-awareness. It means you trust that the right people will celebrate your openness, not punish it. You also start noticing patterns more quickly. Instead of chasing someone who repeatedly pulls back when you show up fully, you recognize it as a mismatch early on. You don't see their withdrawal as a challenge to win them over. You see it as information that they may not be able to meet you where you are. And that's okay, because the more you embrace your depth, the more you realize you don't want to spend your life trying to convince someone to value what you naturally bring. You want to spend it with someone who arrives already ready to value it. And here's something else you'll notice. When you stop apologizing for your depth, you attract people who have been searching for it. People who are tired of shallow conversations, of connections that don't go anywhere real, of holding back their own emotions out of fear. Your authenticity gives them permission to be more themselves. That's the magic of reframing. It doesn't just change how you see yourself, it changes the energy you send out. And that energy draws in people who speak your language, who match your emotional rhythm, who see you're too much. There's exactly enough. Of course, there will still be moments when someone's pullback stings. You're human, and rejection always hurts to some degree. But when you've reframed your depth as a strength, you recover faster. You don't spiral into self-doubt for weeks or months. You remind yourself that it's better to be too much for some than not enough for yourself. And you keep going because you know that every person who walks away is just clearing space for someone who can stay. This doesn't mean you ignore growth opportunities or refuse to look at your part in relationship dynamics. Self-awareness is key. If you notice patterns of overstepping boundaries, overwhelming someone with constant communication, or reacting impulsively, those are areas to work on. Not because you're too much, but because you want to express your depth in ways that are healthy and balanced. Depth and intensity are gifts, but like any gift, they require care in how they're given. Reframing doesn't mean refusing to evolve, it means evolving without erasing yourself in the process. At the end of the day, the phrase "you're too much" only has power over you if you agree with it. If you reject the premise and choose to see it as a mismatch rather than a flaw, you take back the power. You stop chasing approval from people who are never ready for you, and you start holding space for the ones who are. You become both the ocean and the lighthouse, deep enough to explore and bright enough to guide the right people home. So the next time someone pulls away and labels your openness as too much, smile to yourself. Not out of arrogance, but out of quiet knowing that your depth isn't a burden, it's an invitation, and the people who can meet you there will never need you to be less. They'll see your intensity for what it truly is, the purest form of you. And they'll love you not in spite of it, but because of it. When someone pulls away from you, it's like all the oxygen gets sucked out of the room. One moment you were breathing easily, the next you're gasping, trying to figure out what just happened. Your thoughts start circling around them, obsessively replaying the last conversations, scanning for some invisible thread you can grab to pull them back in. And it's exhausting because the more you think about them, the more you starve yourself of the energy you actually need to feel okay. You forget that before they came into your life, you had a whole world, your passions, your routines, your laughter, your people. But in that moment, all of it takes a back seat to this one person's withdrawal. And that's when you have to make a choice. Do you keep feeding all your attention into the space they've created, or do you redirect it back into yourself? Redirecting your energy isn't just about distraction. It's about reclaiming your own emotional center, because when someone pulls away and all of your focus goes toward them, you're basically handing them the keys to your sense of peace. They move away, your peace disappears. They come closer, your peace returns. That's not love. That's dependency dressed up as connection, and it puts you on an emotional roller coaster that you don't even control. The only way off is to take back those keys, to put your energy where it actually nourishes you instead of drains you. It starts with remembering what made you you before they entered the picture. There were things you did that had nothing to do with them. Hobbies that made you lose track of time, places you loved to go, people who made you laugh until your stomach hurt. But when you start centering your life around another person, those parts of you can fade into the background without you even noticing. It's not that you stopped loving them, it's that you stopped choosing them little by little because all of your emotional investment went into the relationship. Redirecting your energy means pulling those parts forward again, not as a way to show them what they're missing, but as a way to remember what you're not missing, yourself. Maybe it's going back to that creative project you kept putting off because you were spending every weekend with them. Maybe it's calling up the friend you haven't seen in months because you've been wrapped up in your couple bubble. Maybe it's hitting the gym, picking up your guitar, joining that class, starting that book, redecorating your space. These aren't just distractions, they're investments. Every time you pour into something that lights you up, you're reinforcing the truth that your joy doesn't hinge on another person's attention. There's a shift that happens when you start living like this. You stop staring at your phone waiting for a text because you're too busy doing things that make you feel alive. You stop analyzing their absence because you're too engaged in your own presence. You stop gripping so tightly to the idea of getting them back. Because you realize you never lost yourself in the first place, or if you did, you're finding your way back now. That's the real power. It's not about being unaffected by their pullback, it's about refusing to let it define your days. Of course, there will be moments when the pull to think about them is strong. That's human. You can't just flip a switch and stop caring. But every time you catch yourself spiraling into thoughts about where they are, what they're feeling, or why they're distant, you can gently guide your focus back towards something you can actually control, your own actions. You can't control whether they text you today, but you can control whether you spend the afternoon in bed, scrolling through old messages, or out in the world, creating new memories that don't include them. And the more you practice this, the more it becomes second nature. There's also something magnetic about this shift. People can sense when you're living from a place of fullness versus a place of emptiness. When you're full, you radiate an energy that's attractive, not because you're trying to get someone's attention, but because you genuinely have your own. You're no longer sending out the silent signal that says, "Please complete me." Instead, your energy says, "I'm already whole and I'm happy to share my life with someone who can meet me here." That's the kind of energy that doesn't chase, it draws. And sometimes the very person who pulled away will feel that shift and come back. But here's the best part. By the time they do, you'll be in such a grounded place that you can actually decide whether you want them back. This redirection also reveals the truth about the connection. When you stop pouring every ounce of your attention into them, you get to see whether they step up on their own. If they do, it's because they're choosing to, not because you pushed them. If they don't, you've just saved yourself the time and energy you might have wasted on someone who was never going to meet you halfway. That's the beauty of taking the focus off them. It frees you from mistaking your effort for their effort. And let's be honest, part of the reason it's so hard to redirect your energy is because thinking about them, even painfully, can feel safer than facing the blank space they leave behind. That blank space can feel lonely, but that space is actually where your power lies. It's where you get to rewrite your routines, rediscover your interests, and reconnect with people who love you without conditions. If you fill that space with versions of yourself you haven't visited in a while, it stops being a void and starts being a canvas. This doesn't mean you swing to the extreme of pretending they never mattered. It's okay to acknowledge the loss. It's okay to feel the hurt. But there's a difference between honoring your feelings and handing them the steering wheel. One keeps you human, the other keeps you stuck. Redirecting your energy is about moving forward without erasing the past, about carrying the lessons without letting the weight crush you. There will be days when it's harder, days when you miss them so much you feel it physically. On those days, the temptation to reach out will be strong, but that's when you remind yourself, if they've chosen to step back, your job isn't to close the distance. It's to fill the space they've left with so much life that their absence stops echoing. And when you do that consistently, you stop waiting for someone to come and save you, because you realize you've been saving yourself all along. And something beautiful happens when you live this way. You start to feel proud of yourself. Proud that you didn't fall apart completely when they pulled away. Proud that you kept showing up for your own life even when someone else stopped showing up for you. That pride builds confidence, and that confidence starts to change the way you move in the world. You stop settling for half-hearted love because you know what it feels like to stand on your own. You stop clinging to people out of fear because you've proven you can survive without them. And the more you live like this, the less you tolerate anyone who makes you feel like your worth depends on their closeness. Redirecting your energy back to yourself isn't just a survival tactic, it's a way of life. It's choosing every day to make your happiness your responsibility. It's refusing to let someone's absence take up more space in your life than your own presence. It's remembering that you are not an accessory to someone else's story. You are the main character in your own. And the more you invest in that role, the more magnetic you become, not because you're trying to be, but because you're living in a way that's rich, full, and undeniably yours. So when they pull away, don't follow. Turn inward, turn outward, turn toward the things that light you up, the people who make you laugh, the places that make you feel alive. And one day you'll wake up and realize that their pullback didn't break you. It led you back to yourself. And that's the person you've been needing to find all along. When someone starts to pull away, it can feel like the walls are closing in. There's that sudden shift in the air. You notice the longer gaps between replies, the shorter responses, the way their voice doesn't have the same warmth, the way plans that once felt effortless now feel like they're slipping through your fingers. It's like watching a scene in slow motion where you know something is changing, but you can't stop it, and every instinct you have wants to run after them, to grab the connection before it's gone, to force it back to how it used to be. But here's the thing, the moment they pull away is the moment you have the chance to see something you might have been too close to notice before. Their distance isn't just absence, it's information. When someone withdraws, they're telling you something, even if they're not saying a word. They are showing you their capacity, their willingness, their priorities. And if you let that process happen without interfering, if you don't rush in to fill the silence or bridge the gap, you get to see the truth in its purest form. Because the truth about people isn't in what they promise when things are easy, it's in what they do when things get complicated. Pullback moments strip away the performances and reveal the reality. The temptation, of course, is to try to prevent that reality from fully forming. We think, if I just explain myself, if I just remind them how good this is, if I just make a little more effort, they'll remember and come back. But when you do that, you're not giving them the space to show you what they do without your prompting. You're essentially filling in their part of the equation, and that means you're never really seeing their side clearly. It's like taking an exam and feeding someone the answers. You'll never know if they could have done it themselves. If you resist the urge to close the gap and instead let them move as far as they feel they need to, you'll discover something important. People who genuinely want to be in your life will find their way back without you chasing them. They'll text you because they want to, not because you nudged them. They'll make plans because it matters to them, not because you reminded them for the 5th time. And when they do, you can trust that their effort is real because it came from them, not from your pressure. This isn't about playing games. It's not about making them prove themselves in some manipulative way. It's about gathering data without interference. In science, you don't change the conditions of the experiment if you want accurate results. You let it run its course so you can see what's real. Relationships are the same. If you're always adjusting the variables, reassuring them, overcompensating for their distance, carrying the connection entirely on your back, you'll never know if they were capable of showing up for you without that constant push. And yes, there's a risk in doing this. The risk is that they won't come back, that they'll keep drifting until they're gone, that the space you allow will turn into a permanent absence. But as painful as that possibility is, it's still better than the alternative, staying in a relationship where the only thing holding it together is your effort. Because if you have to chase someone to keep them close, they were never really there in the first place. The other risk is that you might not like the truth you see. Maybe you'll realize they're not as invested as you thought. Maybe you'll see that they value convenience over connection, that they're fine having you when it's easy but unwilling to weather anything that requires depth or consistency. That's not an easy truth to face, especially when you've imagined a future with them. But avoiding that truth doesn't make it less real. It just delays the moment you have to deal with it. And every day you delay, you're spending more of your life on something that might not be capable of giving you what you need. Letting their pullback reveal the truth is also about freeing yourself from illusions. Sometimes we fall in love not just with a person, but with their potential. The version of them we see in our minds, the one they could become if they just worked through their fears, if they just opened up, if they just realized how much they love us. But potential is not a promise, and the danger of falling in love with potential is that you start building your decisions around a future that doesn't exist yet. When they pull away and you step back instead of forward, you force yourself to see them as they are now, not as they could be someday. And that clarity, painful though it might be, is priceless. There's also a deep kind of self-respect that grows in these moments. When you stop trying to pull someone closer against their will, you start honoring your own worth. You're silently telling yourself, I am not going to beg to be chosen. I am not going to carry this connection alone. I am not going to sell myself the lie that love should feel like convincing someone to stay. That kind of self-respect becomes a boundary you carry with you forever, and it changes not just this relationship, but every relationship that comes after it. Sometimes they will come back. They'll realize the space doesn't feel good. They'll remember the connection. They'll miss you in ways they didn't expect. And when that happens, you get to decide, without desperation, whether their return is something you want. You get to see if their comeback is consistent or just a temporary rush of emotion. And because you didn't chase them, you know that their movement toward you is voluntary. That's powerful because it means if you choose to let them back in, you're building from a place of choice, not fear. Other times they won't return at all. They'll fade into the background of your life, becoming a story you tell yourself less and less often. That's when you realize that their departure wasn't a rejection of your worth, but a redirection towards something better suited for you. And I know how cliché that can sound when you're in the middle of the ache, but time has a way of proving it true. The people who leave are making space for the ones who won't. The sooner you see that, the less you cling to what's already slipping away. The truth is, the right person for you will lean in when things get uncertain. They'll want to understand, to work through it, to find their way back to the closeness you share. They won't see distance as an escape. They'll see it as a problem to solve together. And you'll never have to wonder whether you're too much for them, because they'll see your depth as exactly what makes the connection worth having. That's how you know you're not asking for too much. You're just asking the wrong person. So let them pull away if they need to. Let them show you where they stand when there's space between you. Watch not just what they say, but what they do with that space. Because the person who truly wants to be there will close the gap on their own, and the person who doesn't will make that clear without you having to ask. Either way, you win, because you've stopped trying to manufacture closeness and started letting reality reveal itself. And once you have that clarity, you can stop guessing, stop chasing, and start walking toward the people who don't need convincing to stay. You are not too much. You are exactly enough for the person who's ready for the kind of love, passion, and truth you bring. If someone pulls away, let them, not as a punishment, but as a way of honoring yourself. Because the person who stays, who leans in, who embraces all of you, they won't be overwhelmed by your love. They'll be grateful they found it.